the first official working Beetlejuice video of the year, of Beetle year. I'm going to be working on this project all year long, well, at least until October when the deadline happens. This video in particular, I'm going to be working on this punch list, which I have been avoiding for months. I wrote this list including all of the things that I need to fix on the first floor of the project before I can call it completely done. It has many things that I need to do, and within these just like simple 3-line to-do items, there's some big projects behind these. So I've been pretty intimidated to take it on. But I would much rather force myself through this punch list now in January than continue to push it off until the end of the project and feel like I should have done this earlier. So if you're a list maker like myself, I hope you find this video satisfying because I will be crossing off almost everything. So let's get started. I thought I would start with something easy just so I can go ahead and get something crossed off my list. I feel like that's a great way to start. If you're noticing the little numbers on my punch list, it's because I ordered them from easiest to hardest. So that's what those numbers are. The archway between the living room and the kitchen, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to mess with it, but I felt like you could really tell like it was the edge of foam board, so I decided to add a layer of Mod Podge and then paint over it once again. While I was waiting for the Mod Podge to dry, I added some Post-its to protect my floor, and then I used some of the same blue paint to do some touch-ups that I mentioned on my list. Once the Mod Podge dried, I could go over this area again with blue paint, and I think it smoothed out the archway overall. I'm still not 100% happy with the archway, but I'm more happy than I was at the beginning when I first put it on the list. One of the things I'm going to have to work on for each one of the first floor rooms is the connection with the magnet wall. I have just kind of let them be rough over the years. I didn't really pay attention to them, but if you watched my Netherworld wrap up, I decided to do this little detail with the bugs. Anywhere there's like an opening or an edge to the house or the display. So I laser cut these bugs and I painted them. Now I'm adding them to the opening and I'm going to add some little dots here and there. I think it kind of looks like a little scurry of bugs going up the side of the house, which goes with my theme of Beetlejuice, bugs, beetles, you know. And already I'm feeling productive because I can go ahead and mark a few things off of my list. I painted the magnet wall connection, I did the blue paint touch-up, and I fixed the archway. The other two things are going to come later because they are a bit more complicated. I need to create a door. So I did do that on the computer off to the side and I am printing it. So that will come back in later. Doors are, it's one of the more complicated things I knew I would have to do on the list. So I am just checking it to make sure it's the right size. I did have to reprint a couple parts of the door because they weren't working, but we will come back to that. I will finish the door. While the door is in production, I can go ahead and work on a few things that need to be done in the dining room. This magnet wall is on the same side as the kitchen magnet wall, so I figured it made sense to go ahead and work on this spot since I already had out the paints, I already had out the bugs, might as well make another connection look good. Each connection is going to be a different color. This one was gray to match the gray interiors of the floors, and so I decided to add blue bugs to match the walls. I'm going to have different color bugs in the different rooms. One thing that came to my attention recently is that I never glued in the glass block wall into the wall of the dining room. It's always just kind of been sitting there via tension, and lately I've noticed that it's been starting to pop out, which is a good reminder that I need to fix that and permanently glue it in. That was kind of a last minute addition to the punch list. There's always more I can find that I need to do. As you can see here, it is written in a different type of Sharpie, and that's because I added it on later once I realized it wasn't permanently glued in. If you haven't seen my glass block wall, it is the blue glass block that you can see on the inside here. It is actually made out of resin, and you might be able to tell it's not sitting flush with the back of the wall. Before I started working on it, I decided to go ahead and work on the connections on the wall itself. So I sanded down the sides because they were pretty rough. I think I had torn up some of the foam board here. So I sanded them down and went over them with another layer of gray paint. And this really made them look a lot nicer. I also needed to add a baseboard. Thankfully, I had the forethought to make extra baseboards back when I was working on this room, so I did not have to try to match the paint or the splatters. Everything was already made. I just had to cut it to size and glue it in place. Unfortunately, what I'm doing right now on screen is gluing it in the wrong spot. I'm gluing it on the top of the wall instead of the bottom, but I will notice and fix that later in the video. So this is not the correct direction of the wall. I'm even doing touch-ups here on either side of the baseboard. Thankfully, it's the same exact size piece I'll need for the baseboards once I put it on the actual base of the wall. The glass block is made from resin, and I do have a video over the process of making it. This was one of the first rooms I worked on, and at the time I wasn't very knowledgeable about resin, and I'm still not, and it ended up warping, and I thought the warp looked better turned the other way, but I've decided to turn it around. And once I turned it around so that it's kind of curved to the outside, I realized it wasn't fitting back into the wall. So I cut a little bit more of the wall off, which is a bit nerve-wracking to do this late in the project, and then I pressed the window back into place. This is opposite of how I had it before, but I think it looks better, and I think once the siding is on there, it will start to hide how the glass block looks. That's my hope, at least. Before gluing it back in, I painted the edges with gray paint to match the interior of the wall room, and then I'm going to add glue and glue this in permanently so it will never fall out again. And to double make sure of this, I'm going to be using Dollhouse Band-Aids, which is basically just computer paper covered in glue, to go over each of the edges to make sure that it really can't fall out. It's a little bit difficult to see here because it's white paper on white foam board, but it's just barely covering the edge of the glass block insert so that it won't be able to come out the back of the room. This is when I realized that my baseboard was on the ceiling, so I popped it off, and at the same time realized that the spray paint I used to create this wall doesn't allow glue to stick very well. I mean, the baseboard popped off really easily, which was great for the situation, but now I am sanding the bottom part of the wall where I need to reinstall the baseboards so that hopefully it won't pop off in the future. So baseboard is now in the correct spot, the glass block wall is permanently secured into place, and now I can return the magnet wall to its home, making sure to squash the bugs in the wall. This was actually the first time I had put the magnet walls back in place after adding the little bug cutouts, and I wanted to make sure that they still fit fairly flush because the bugs are cut from cardstock, which do have a bit of thickness to them. Now I can pretty much cross out everything on the dining room list, which I'm really thankful for, but it was the easiest room, and the more difficult projects are in the other two rooms on this list. Time to talk about one of the items on the punch list that I have been dreading so much. I hate redoing things that I have already done, and I will do almost anything to avoid that. I will add little fixes in there to try and make what I've already done work. However, the front doors of the house were just not working, and I wasn't happy with them. I stated that in a video, and a very kind viewer, Vicky, reached out to me and was able to help me with that. So we are now going to finally replace the front doors of the Beetlejuice Dollhouse, and it'll be worth it. It'll be worth the pain of doing it all over again. Here are the famous front red doors of the Beetlejuice Dollhouse, the house design after Delia took over, and they do not open. Not even 45 degrees. They do not open hardly at all. These were my very first attempt at door designs, and I like how they look, but they just don't function. So we need to remove them. This is killing me to have to pull something out of the dollhouse. I'm using a flathead screwdriver here and just slowly pulling around all of the edges. I don't want to yank too hard on one corner before releasing it so that I don't actually just pull the whole wall down. As you can see, it did do quite a bit of damage to the front of the foam board, but all of that will be covered with siding eventually, so I'm not worried about it, and I'm hoping I don't have to remove the trim for the door on the inside at all. So here you can see the trim. I am leaving that attached because it is attached to wallpaper that I don't want to have to redo. So here is the door that I designed. You can see how little it is opening. And I'm going to open up a package from Vicky from Diva Diorama. Vicky kindly reached out and said, hey, I think I can redesign your doors for you. I have some background in designing doors and making working miniatures. So if you would give me your files, I'd love to give it a try. And beyond fixing my doors, she even reprinted them for me, which was so kind. So that's what I'm opening now. And I did a lot of looking at these doors, figuring out what she did different. I used wires in my hinges and she used nails, and there's just a lot more to her design that made it work. And another thing she was able to do is to remove the center column that I had put in my original doors. The reason this is amazing is because I can open the doors and allow this to be another look inside the house. Now I took what I learned from Vicky's doors and used that to create my side door that later I will be adding into the kitchen. So now I get to go through the process of putting these doors together again. It takes a while to paint, insert the plastic for the glass, so I won't make you watch it all again, especially since I'm about to paint a white plastic door white, but I do have this little segment for you when my niece came to visit. I'm calling it 2 minutes with my 2-year-old niece. Hey, don't touch. It's got paint. Yeah, don't touch. It's got paint everywhere. Do you know what it is? Quiet. Oh, okay, we gotta be quiet. I'm painting a door.
Oh, okay. For you.
Oh, that's for me? Okay, thank you. Should I use this on my door?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Stormy wants to play with you.
No, Stormy. No, Stormy.
Does that look like a door?
Sure.
Sure?
Hey, no, the red one. Purple.
What color is this? Look at it again.
Purple.
This is purple?
Yeah.
Are you sure it's not blue?
That's the blue.
It's blue. Yeah, it's blue. I'm gonna paint the door blue. Ooh, that makes a silly noise, huh? And what color am I gonna paint?
Pink.
Pink?
Yeah.
What about this?
Sure.
Okay, I'll paint it blue. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, making a big mess.
Yeah.
What would mommy say?
We're gonna clean them up.
Clean them up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mommy's smart, huh? You have a smart mommy?
My mommy.
Yeah.
My mommy's.
Yeah. She's very smart.
Yeah. Very careful.
Be really careful?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
I mean.
Bye! Her visit with us for the day definitely made my painting of the doors go by faster, and she had several helpful suggestions. Maybe in the future, if I create the pink palace, she can come back and do my art direction and make sure I get all the right color pinks for the project. But back to the doors, I'm pretty much done with the painting and I'm able to insert the plastic into the openings. These are easily done with scrap plastic from packaging. I don't really use anything special here and it seems to work. So now that I have the plastic in place and I have the doors painted, I can put them together and really start to see how they work. And you will notice once you start to see the two doors that these come out a little bit darker. My first set of doors was brighter, But I do end up liking this darker color better, and I do feel like I like it even more once I put it back into the house opening. While I get the nails in place, I do want to do a quick shout out to Ruiqi. As I said, she has a business called Diva Diorama, and she does occasionally post things in her shop. I will leave a link for her shop on Etsy down below in the description if you want to take a look. Thank you so much, Ruiqi, for sending these doors, for fixing them, for printing them for me, and just making this whole process of redoing something I didn't want to redo that much easier. Once I got the nails in place, I used the same method for my kitchen door. I added nails into the openings, and both doors seem to be working really well. Here's a close-up comparison with my original doors. You can see the center bar, and you can see they just do not open up all that well, and these open up so much more. There's going to be such a better view inside of the house, and especially to see that snakeskin stairway railing that I worked so hard on. This is going to be the best view of it, so I'm very thankful about that. The old doors still have an extension piece that was put on to make sure it fit into the wall, and because these two doors are designed off of the same file, I still need this little mat board extension piece to make sure that my door fits in the wall. This wasn't something that I thought to adjust when I sent the files over to Ruiqi. So I used my craft blade to pry it off of the old doors so that I could stick it on to the new doors. And by this view, you can see that Ruiqi also added some nice details to the back of the doors, where my original doors were just like, they look like plain concrete. So all around, this whole door thing was a huge upgrade. I painted in any areas that needed a touch-up, and now the doors are done. Well, they need doorknobs. I always forget doorknobs, and I used beads like this in the sandworm scene, and I mentioned how I wished I had more. And I want to say a big thank you to Tracy for sending me an entire bag of what I'm calling mini pony beads. These are a little bit smaller than regular pony beads, or what I think are regular pony beads, and they make fantastic doorknobs. Tracy also sent me a couple little gnomes along with the beads. However, they got some damage in the mail, so I'm hoping I can fix those and use them in a later project. But for now, I'm super happy to put together these little doorknobs with the beads, a little piece of Q-tip, and a couple hole punches. And this is going to make a doorknob. I'm making 6 of them because I need 4 for the front door, 2 outside, 2 inside, and then 2 for the kitchen door, 1 for the outside, 1 for the inside. And I'm just going to go ahead and make them all the same. They're a similarly designed door, so it makes sense to me that they would have similar doorknobs. I painted them silver because I feel like everything is a very cold feeling to Delia's designs, so gold just wouldn't make sense. I painted them silver and glued them in place on the front doors and the side door for the kitchen. I can now install my finished doors into the gaping hole at the front of the house, and look how beautifully they pop open, how well they display the front area of the house. I did notice that you could see a little bit more of the back frame, or the frame that's on the inside of the house, and that's because the door is just designed a little bit different. So I made sure to paint that gray so that when the doors open, it doesn't really stick out. It doesn't stick out as something weird. Then I could add glue and get the new front door in place. And I did make sure that the doors were closed while it was gluing. I do think that's an important step with doors, just to make sure that it works both open and closed in the gluing process, that you aren't getting it kind of pushed off to a diagonal or in a way that causes the doors not to work. Here's a better look at how much it shows you the inside of the house, straight into the stairway, of course. Thank you again, Ruiqi, for all your time you put into this project. I am so happy with the upgrade. I'm also going to install my kitchen door at this time. That was one of the 2 items left on my punch list for the kitchen. The other is to add the interior trim, which I did have to cut the corners off of because of the previously installed baseboards. I will show you how those look on the inside, but first let's cross off the rest of the items in the kitchen because we added the door and made the interior door frame, and in the living room we fixed the front doors, which I added several exclamation points next to because that was the one I had been dreading from the beginning. I also added doorknobs, which I needed the reminder because I always forget. Here's a quick look at the kitchen door, especially from the inside, so you can see how the trim is looking. I painted it the same color as the rest of the walls, and it's good to go. I'm thinking I might need to find like a place to use these doors. Maybe I could make like a flat frame or something like that and make something totally different with it. I might just hang it up on the wall. But it's a fun memory of my first Beetlejuice doors, and then it's always worth it to get something right if you're just really unhappy with it. Speaking of doors, I thought I was done with doors until I looked on my punch list, and under the category garage, I realized I needed to create garage doors. Now thankfully, these garage doors do not need to function, so they'll be a little bit easier than the doors I just made, but they still need to be made. So let's do that now. The garage is kind of an unofficial part of the first floor. It's more in the ground floor, like it's in the ground, it's in the hill. So I hadn't really thought about it, but it is on the list, so I want to go ahead and create it. I'm going to be using some foam board. This is just some scrap foam board that I'm not even quite sure what I used it on. I had to go ahead and make all of the 90-degree angles again because there wasn't a 90-degree angle left on the corners. So I created a rectangle that was about the size of the garage opening and cut it in half to create 2 doors that will open up to the side. I decided to remove the top layer of foam board because I am going to be carving into the foam to create the individual wood panels. I looked in my mat board scraps and found some scraps I could use as wood planks. I'm using a pen to create grooves in the top of the foam, and I'm not trying to keep these even or anything. I'm thinking of these as really old garage doors that got painted over in the renovation. I can't imagine that Delia really cares that much about the garage, so she probably just had someone paint the doors white. I'm adding some wood glue over the top of the foam board. This is going to fill in some of the foam board texture, and it's also going to give a little bit more strength to this side of the foam. Then I can start adding some of my mat board strips that are acting as the wood supports that's holding my garage door together. I cut the diagonals to make sure it fit across all the boards, and as I create both of these, I'm trying to make them mirrored so that when I add them to the front of the garage, it makes sense. I added a little bit of wood glue to the face of the mat board and ran an acid brush through it, and this is to give it a bit more texture, hopefully to have a rougher look like wood. I then used my craft knife to carve at the edges of the foam board and the mat board. I'm hoping this will give an aged look because if there were doors that had been used many times over the years, they would have been worn by hitting the gravel, worn by getting hit by cars and tools. So I wanted to make them look a little bit beat up. Once the mat board was applied, I used an awl to push in what looks like some little areas where screws or nails had been put into the boards. This is what it looks like close up. I like to do this anytime I'm working with something that's roughly supposed to look like it's made from rough wood. I realize that you will see just a small sliver of the other side of the door, so I decided to kind of fake the other side of the door. I'm not putting that much energy into it, so I did carve just a couple panels and put some fake supports at the top and bottom, but most of the back of the doors will be obscured by the wall, so I didn't want to put a ton of time into creating those areas. Once I was happy with the gate build, I could go ahead and do a base coat of black paint. I wanted to make sure the black paint got into all the little crevices, all the lines I had created into the foam board, and then I went over it with a light brown to kind of make more of a wood look, and then I stippled white paint all over the top. This was going to make sure that no white paint at all got into the grooves. I feel like this makes the gate look more worn, especially since these are the inside panels to the garage. They would maybe not be as painted as Delia would want the outside doors to look. Speaking of the outside of the doors, I did do some of the very same steps, although I am adding more white paint because I do think the outside of the doors would be a fresher coat of paint matching the outside of Delia's renovated house. I wanted to add some big, thick handles for the garage doors because they'd have to be pretty sturdy to be opened manually every single day to get your car in and out. So I used some strips of poster board and then just forced it into a handle shape, and then painted it gray and glued that onto the front of the gate. I also made matching handles for the back of each side of the gate. This is my first test attempt to see if I measured correctly, to see if the garage door pieces actually fit into the opening, and I think they fit pretty well. I do believe the garage would have been fine if I had never made these gate style doors to go on the front. I'm not sure many people would have noticed, but I know that I would have noticed, and I would be like, well, how do they close the garage? Does it just stay open all the time? So I knew I had to make them. So while I'm here, while I have the garage doors in, I just glued them in place. I decided to go ahead and do the other thing, which is age the top of the walls. In a previous video, I worked on the ceiling, and I guess the top of the walls just needed a bit more aging so they look like they matched the ceiling. So now all of my garage tasks are done, and I can be done with all the doors. All the doors on the first floor and the garage are done, and I can move on and not have to worry about them anymore. So I'm happy with that. Any more landscaping, any more that needs to be done to this area will be done during the landscaping phase, which will be closer to the end of the project. Now we can finally leave this side of the house. We need to go back inside the living room, and yes, we are going to be focusing on the fireplace, another one I have been avoiding. Let's talk about the fireplace. So the punch list says that the fireplace needs baseboards around it. It says baseboards around fireplace, but that's not actually accurate. What I really need is a hearth. I'll show you what it looks like in the movie. There are these little glass blocks, and I think they're glass so that they could light them up from underneath. They're pretty cool looking. I like how they look. I am going to have to do them a little bit differently, but it's definitely going to be more work than just gluing baseboards around the fireplace. So kind of mad at myself for making it look like I had less work to do, but that's what I mean about little tiny projects being hidden within the punch list. It can say what I need to do, but there's always just a little bit more time and effort and thought that needs to go into each thing. Making a punch list, or whatever you want to call it, any kind of list where you have a list of things you need to do, very daunting. So let's work on the fireplace. The fireplace is built on a magnet wall, so thankfully it's easy to remove and work on my desk. You will notice it's looking a little bit rough. There are holes here and there, so hopefully I can fix that today. I didn't quite know where the wiring was going to come out of. I ended up making it come out of the side. So now I can kind of fill in those gaps and make this entire wall look like it is a finished piece. Most of my project has turned out a little wonky, so instead of trying to measure and do 90-degree angles to find the right size pieces to fit into all the gaps, I am just going to try to trace the gaps. So I'm using a piece of computer paper, feeling around the edges of the gaps with my finger, and then tracing with a pencil. I'm cutting out a stencil out of the paper so I know what size piece to create before I glue it in place. The hearth, or the bottom of the fireplace, is going to be especially complicated because there are multiple layers and multiple walls within the fireplace. So I'm just going slowly to make my pattern, and I know it's not going to be perfect on the first try, so I'll go ahead and cut it out and make adjustments as I need. It fit most of the way. I could see there were some gaps, so I took some extra bits of paper and used tape to fill in those gaps, so I had a fairly tight fit. Now I do have to fit this inside of my previously built wall because the fireplace magnet wall fits perfectly between the ceiling and the floor of the first floor, so I can't add anything above or below my previously built foam board, so I have to add it inside the foam board. I used the template to decide how big I wanted my hearth to be, how far I wanted it to stick out from the front of the fireplace, and cut that into my pattern. I could then cut everything out of foam board and start filling in the gaps. I know for sure I'm not going to need these for wiring up my lights anymore, so I can cover them up. And eventually this gap on the back is going to be covered in siding. I just want to make sure that the foam board hole is filled. It was a pretty tight fit for the floor of the fireplace, but that's good because I don't want a ton of light leakage coming out of the bottom or from the bottom up into the opening of the fireplace. Now I can start creating my faux glass tiles to mimic what I saw in the movie. The first thing I'm going to do is cut a line where the tiles are going to exist and remove the top layer of paper to reveal the foam board underneath. I'm using a 6-inch ruler with a sharp edge to start cutting in my square tiles. You can also do this with the tip of a pen or pencil, but I knew I wanted straight lines, so I just went ahead with the ruler. I'm not too worried about keeping the square tiles perfectly square because this hearth does stretch and change shape at the same time as the fireplace stretches and changes shape in the movie. It's kind of a claymation type scene where everything contorts. To cover up the foam texture and make it look a little bit more like a smooth tile, I'm adding a layer of wood glue and allowing that to sit over the top of the pattern I just created. Wood glue does a fairly good job of self-leveling and making a smooth surface, but because of this I have to go back and make sure I re-carve those grooves in between my tiles. Here's how it's looking while it's still very wet. It did take a long time to dry, so while I was waiting I decided to work on the top edge of the fireplace. This is made up of multiple different pieces of foam board, and I never really thought about in my head how when the wall is pulled out from the house, it is going to be visible. So I actually do need to make it look somewhat presentable. So now that I have my hole filled in with a piece of foam board, I'm going to use a layer of tissue paper because I have to keep it as flat as possible so it fits back into the house. I'm going to lay that tissue paper over the glue, let it dry, and then cut off the excess. My hope in doing this is that it will make a more unified looking surface. I know it won't be perfectly flat, but if I can at least make it look like all one piece that maybe has some different levels and grooves to it, and then paint it all one color. My hope is I just really want it to make it look like something people don't want to look at, that there's so much else going on in the room that it's a boring part to look at. So that's what I was doing with the tissue paper and the matte black paint. So now that the tiles are dry, I can go ahead and paint this piece. It's going to be easier to paint before I insert it into the fireplace. I'm painting it on both sides just so that I reduce any amount of warping that might happen. The portion that's painted black is going to be inside of the fireplace, and then the tiles that are part of the hearth are going to be painted white. And if you aren't patient with your wood glue, like I wasn't, I felt like it was pretty dry, but I knew it wasn't all the way dry, you can create crackle paint. This is because the wood glue continues to dry after you painted on top of it. I did another layer of white paint to combat this, and then I did some watered down blue acrylic. My hope is that by adding little hints of color here and there, it will look like the tiles are picking up the color from the surrounding areas of the house. Although I realized it would probably make more sense to have a bit more green because the fireplace surround has that green color and the blue is off in the dining room. My diamond glaze is getting very old, so it's a little bit hard to work with. I'm hoping it will be enough to cover this hearth. Diamond glaze is what I call non-resin resin. It just air dries. You don't have to have a UV light, but it does a really good job at making things very shiny. It is also fairly good at self-leveling. Because it was coming out of the bottle so thick, it did pick up some of my brush strokes, which I ended up liking, but most of the time, if you have a newer, more liquidy version of diamond glaze, it will also self-level and give you a really nice finish. So now that that's all done and dry, I can go ahead and insert the bottom of the fireplace wall into the fireplace. And here's how it's looking. You can see a little bit of white at the back of the fireplace. I will paint over that. But I think the hearth works pretty well for the sample that I saw without using resin. I'm going to do the same exact tissue paper trick to the bottom of my fireplace wall. This really isn't going to be a surface that anyone looks at very much, but if someone does happen to get down and look up at the bottom of the fireplace wall, I don't want it to catch their eye with just how unfinished it is. So I am putting the tissue paper on there and then painting it black. And once it was dry, I could put it back into the project to make sure that the hearth works with the floor that is already installed in the living room. And it does. I think it looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. So I can now cross a few more things off of my living room list. But we're not quite done yet. There's still a few items left. I mentioned this in the studio glimpse that I posted last week. If you haven't seen that, I'm just going to be posting some smaller, less edited videos kind of showing you what I'm working on during the week in between these really long project videos that I'm working on, like the one that I'm showing you right now. In that video, I asked the question, to glue or not to glue? I was having a stair dilemma. The stairs in the first floor are loose. It's kind of nice to be able to take them out if I need to work on something or I need a flat top on the first floor. However, them being loose, they're rattling around. I really wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. My patrons and my YouTube members highly suggested magnets, and I've used magnets everywhere else in the project, so why not give it a try? I have never created magnet stairs, but there's a first time for everything, and I cannot put the baseboards in, which is on the punch list, until I make a decision about the stairs. So let's give it a try. Once again, I am so thankful to past Era who thought about making extra baseboards, especially when I knew I wasn't going to finish the baseboards at that time. So I have those ready to go. Here's the set of stairs that I mentioned. They're wobbly. They don't sit entirely flat, so I know I can't just add baseboards and they're going to be perfect. What I want to do is add magnets into the hidden side of the stairs, and then I'm going to put pin nails in the wall. And if you haven't seen my videos before, I like to use magnets and pin nails mainly because two magnets trying to hold on to each other. First of all, you have to make sure you get them going in the right direction with the right polarity, and oftentimes the hold is so strong it will pull the magnet out of the wall. So I'm going to be putting just the magnets inside of the staircase. So I cut the holes that were about the right size in the surface of the foam board, and then the pin nails are going to go into the wall. Once the magnets were inserted into the holes, I put what I call dollhouse band-aids over them. It's just paper and glue. And then in order to figure out where I need to put the opposite pin nail into the wall so that it can grab onto the magnet, I added a dab of paint onto the top of the magnet area and then pushed it up against the wall. I used a dark gray, hopefully, so if I made a mistake or got it against something else, it wouldn't be super noticeable, and they weren't. I even had to look pretty hard to see where the paint dots were. Then I took my pin nails, put them over the area where I had the dot of paint, and then drew where I needed to start cutting into the wall so I could insert the pin nails. Now this isn't going to look super nice and neat. This is what happens when you're working on a project that's already glued together and you're trying to work from top down onto vertical walls. So I'm trying my best, but thankfully all of this will be hidden. And as you can see, it really helped having doors that could open all the way so I could put my hand through the front door to get to that low spot. But then I started adding in the pin nails into the rectangle openings, just like I did for the magnets. And then I covered each one with the paper and glue to make sure there was no way it would pull out at any point, and it would permanently stay in the wall. I did this for every single spot. And then I decided to paint the paper gray, even though I no longer have this exact gray. I don't know if that was a good idea or if I should have just left it bare paper. I'm not quite sure, but no one will really see this once the house is set up. And I did leave the audio in so you can hear the magnets click. It's not the most satisfying magnet click I've had in this project, probably because there's 6 individual magnets, but the stairs are much more secure now. I don't feel like they're going to be wobbling around inside of my project. Once they're in the project and set up whenever I decide to display the house, they're good to go. They're staying in their spot. Now that the stairs have been secured, I can go back to adding in the baseboards. I don't show it in this video, however, I did have the stairs clicked in place while I was adding the baseboards around the bottom to make sure that they lined up with the floor, that it covered all of the gaps and fit really well with where the stairs were lining up against the magnet wall. I then used some paint and a little bit of filler to make sure that all of my edges were lining up, and here we are, the stairs are in place. They're done. And I'm happy with the results. I'm happy I did it this way. We have just one more thing to focus on, and that is this magnet wall connection. I have painted the one in the dining room, I painted the one in the kitchen, and now it's time to make sure and give a little bit of attention to the one in the living room. Again, I am using the laser cut bugs and I'm using a ball stylus to add little dots around them. And as simple as that, the connection for the fireplace is done. And I can make sure it all fits back together. I'm just checking everything is dry before I do that, or we really will have bugs smashed into the wall. And with that final click in place, I can finally mark the last few things off of my list. They kind of all went together. And so thankfully everything is done. The living room is done. The doors are replaced. The kitchen has been touched up. The kitchen has a door. The garage has doors. And what else? In the dining room, I permanently installed the glass block wall, and now I just have to add the final lights, and as I told you, that is going to be done off camera. And then the last thing I do before I do the final shots will be to dust everything. So here's a look. It may not look very different to you, but to me, I'm seeing so many differences, so many areas where I touched things up. And I'm a lot happier looking in knowing that the baseboards are in. And this little gap here to the right, that is actually supposed to be there. I had to stop myself from filling it in with a baseboard. It is for the red bar. The red bar is supposed to sit flat against the wall. So that is a wrap on the punch list. It is finally finished and I couldn't be happier. Before I end the video, I do have one more thing to show you. I had another house sent in for the Beetlejuice attic diorama. This mini house was sent in by Sue. This was made in memory of her brother-in-law's house that was lost in a recent forest fire. Thankfully, her brother-in-law is okay. And along with the house, Sue also sent me a needle felted Christmas ornament. This is Beetle Gnome, and I'm excited to add him with my Christmas decor. And he even has a little tag with all of Sue's artist info. Thank you so much for sending it in. I can't believe that we're really only a few months away from working on the attic and working on that diorama and taking all of the houses that you have so generously sent in and putting them together. I think that might be one of the projects I'm most excited about that I get to do very soon. The only thing left on this punch list now is adding in the lights, and to dust. And I'm going to do that at the very end. I have decided that I'm going to do the lights off camera. That way Mr. Technology and I can just work on it whenever we have like little bits of time here and there. And I don't have to worry about setting up the camera and angles and all of that kind of stuff. I will, of course, show you how it looks in the end. There'll be like a final first floor tour where you can see how it looks all together with my punch list items and the lights all complete. And then finally, we can get to a new room. New room, new room, new room. I'm excited, new room. So most likely the next video you will see from me, I will be working on Charles and Delia's room because we did take time making the furniture for that room. Might as well finish up the walls. Thank you so much for following along with this process of getting through a very long list of some not very exciting things. But looking at the first floor now, I really think all of these items leveled up the work I had already done there, and I'm so happy I went through with it. I still see mistakes. I still see little bits here and there, things that I could redo, things that I would do differently now. However, I feel like if I just continue to pick at every single little thing, I'm never going to move forward. I'm never going to get to any other rooms. I'm never going to finish this project. And I'm trying to remind myself that there is going to be furniture, there's going to be dolls, there's going to be lights, there's going to be multiple floors, so nobody's going to be looking at the very far back corner that just needs a little dab of paint more, you know? So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed watching. Make sure if you are subscribed that you have hit the notification bell because I will be working on this project all year long. There is one project that's going to get a little bit of attention in the middle somewhere, and you'll never guess who. It's a secret. I'll let you know in a bit. But other than that, it's going to be Beetle Year. So make sure that you've got your notifications on, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. All right, I know you have not seen this in a very long time, and that's because I have hidden it in the corner behind a large dollhouse so that I don't have to look at it and I don't have to remember that I haven't even started Cardboard House 2, which was supposed to happen last year. However, we have done enough. We have finished up the netherworld. I just did the first floor punch list. We deserve some lines on the Beetlejuice project, so let me get a pen. I'm first gonna mark a line about how I feel progress is going. I feel like we're there. But I am going to give myself a little bit more credit. All right, we still have a while to go. We still have a ways to go, but I am going to try and keep up with this chalkboard more because I do think it's encouraging to see this line fill up and up. Wait, I put it on the right project. Just had to check. Yay, progress!